I never thought my entire life would shift in the split second I opened a dusty old safe. The very same day, my husband's ashes were still warm in the urn. My hand trembled as I reached in, and there, nestled between bank books and the sum of decades of secret hope, I found a faded contract bearing a name I once cherished so deeply that it made my heart ache to read it again. It was my first love. In that moment, memories crashed over me, richer, heavier than any breath I'd taken in years. Now at 67, I always thought my later years would be as quiet as the clay jars in the country yard where I grew up. But life with my husband, young Sue, was marked by his mother's relentless presence, the kind of mother-in-law who believed the world only spun properly if she picked the plates, arranged the chopsticks, and told us how to live. Young Sue was gentle, always more at ease, giving in than fighting back, and I had learned to cleave to the edges of every day, saving a slice of air for myself. My secret savings account, those were the breaths I hoarded. Every odd job, every careful deposit, a testament to my stubborn need to have something that was mine. After young Sue passed away, the house became colder and heavier, as if the absence of his laughter left the air thicker. Our only son, Junho, was about to be married, and suddenly the home was not empty, but teeming with tension. My mother-in-law, stronger than ever in her grief, insisted that Junho and his fiancée, Sujin, should rent a place on a long-term lease, the proud Korean tradition of jeonse, no exceptions. She called monthly rent poison, a leak that would sap dignity, and she ruled with a certainty impossible to challenge. To her, every belonging in the house and every member of the family had a proper place to stand, visible to her approving gaze. But Junho and Sujin dreamed new dreams. Their jobs demanded mobility, and they saw freedom, not shame, in an ordinary monthly rent apartment. They dreaded the idea of sinking all their savings into one place and losing the little agility young lives need. I was aching, suspended between two worlds, a pillar supporting both the stern expectations of the elders and the restless hopes of the young. The air at home grew sharp with the words jeonse and wool, fixed labels that stuck to every conversation. My mother-in-law's voice grew sharper, while my children's eyes became distant and cool. In the midst of this, I found myself at the bank, organizing papers for Junho's future. That's when I rediscovered that old contract and saw, pressed beneath a faded seal, the name Dongmin Kim. The boy who once sat across from me at the corner snack shop outside our university gate. The one who had dared me to imagine a world beyond the footprints of our mothers, and who, long ago, moved to another city before I ever had the courage to follow my heart. Just seeing his name again stirred up dust in the deepest rooms of my soul. I closed the contract quickly. The documents were from my mother-in-law, and asking about them would invite storms I wasn't ready to face. Every breath after that moment felt measured. My mother-in-law's need for control reached its brightest, sharpest bloom. She visited our house daily, fussed over the kitchen towels, lined up glasses in the cupboard, asked about how much I could contribute to Junho's new home. My avoidance must have been obvious. She tried, with the precision of an accountant, to extract numbers from the evasions written on my face. I clung even more tightly to my secret savings. That account was no longer just a hidden fund. It was my invisible spine, proof that I still had the right to age on my own terms. Meanwhile, the children's spirits dulled like silver untended. and the old woman's presence grew as insistent as a draft in winter. And then, on what seemed like any other ordinary day, the past walked right back into my present. I attended a senior learning class at our local community center, looking for distraction when I saw a figure at the end of the hallway. Dongmin. He was older, his hair more salt than black, but his smile as gentle and warm as I remembered. He was holding real estate brochures, and I learned in soft, silent waves through the rumor mill of our small town that he had settled nearby as a property manager. I straightened myself, steadying my voice, afraid of what mix of memory and reality I might disturb if I let that encounter with my first love become anything more than a flicker. I locked it inside. Some doors open more than they close. If I wasn't careful, every room in my life could tumble out of order. But the world has a way of unmasking what we try hardest to protect. Soon after, I overheard, quite by chance, that the owner of the very apartment Junho and Sujin wanted to rent was none other than Dongmin. The world is wide, but in our neighborhood, it is as small as your own two hands. The unit suited all their needs. I tried to pretend at ignorance, desperate to keep this overlap of worlds from catching fire. But my mother-in-law's determination would not allow such evasions. On the day we visited that apartment, my heart was wild with worry. The apartment was bright and airy, promising the children a new life. Dongmin appeared briefly. I kept my eyes on the floor, unwilling to betray my tangled feelings. Still, my mother-in-law was perceptive in ways that made one wish to be invisible. On the way home, I sensed a new coldness in her, a metallic edge to her silence. That night, for the first time, I caught her lingering over my drawers. I realized I had run out of hiding places. I was about to become nothing more than an envelope passed between others, wedged between the certainty of her will and the uncertain future of my children. For days, I wandered the markets and the community center, searching for an answer that seemed impossible. At last, I resolved to do what I thought I never would, use part of my secret retirement savings to help Junho and Sujin begin their new life. If contributing my own hard-earned money could soften my mother-in-law's fierce devotion to tradition, maybe it would buy enough peace so the children could choose their path, be it lease or monthly rent. I want to plant one small seed of neutrality in our house. I hope that I could protect everyone, if only a little. Then in the course of cleaning my mother-in-law's room, a clue presented itself, unexpected and decisive. Buried in the depths of her desk, I found an old envelope. The outside was streaked with dates and numbers, and inside were newspaper clippings about housing scams that plagued Korea decades ago. She had underlined key words in red, marking each article with desperate care. There was also an old passbook, modest deposits made by my in-laws, dated nearly to the year I married young Sue. The amounts were small but regular, and beside them, a nickname almost like my own name circled through the years. Suddenly, I understood. My mother-in-law had once lost everything in a rental deposit scam, and the memory of that fear had never let her rest. She didn't trust the world not to take everything from her again, so she clung to the safety of tradition with all the strength she had left. This was her way of loving, hard as it was to bear. I closed the envelope. I knew, finally, that carrying someone else's old wound in your hands might warm you for a moment, but it doesn't heal the wound, not theirs, not yours. Yet that night, I could not decide whose future to choose. I saw the sense, both in my mother-in-law's steadfast fear and my children's longing for freedom. I hit silently at the fault line between old and new, right and possible, loving and letting go. The following morning, I went to the bank. I decided to take out an amount from my secret account, a gift for Junho and Sujin to use as they wished. My own security, saved over a lifetime, had become too heavy to keep padlocked away. But as I gathered my papers at the bank, I noticed something wrong. The balance was noticeably higher than before. Only after I checked the transaction history did I see the names attached to those deposits: Jungsun Park, my mother-in-law, and Dongmin Kim. The truth hit me with the force of a winter squall. My most tightly guarded secret, my claim to independence, had been breached by the very people I most feared to expose it to. How long had my mother-in-law known? Perhaps all those years she'd pretended indifference. She'd also peered through cracks in my household ledger and seen what I tried to hide. Every so often, she had quietly added money to my account, a gesture that, in its own silent way, said everything she could not. She wanted me, her daughter-in-law, to have a lifeline, so that if I was ever pushed out the door, at least I would stand on my own feet. Underneath the layers of her obsession was a mother's fear and a fierce, painful love. And then there was Dongmin. My heart pounded with confusion. Only slowly did it dawn on me. Dongmin had learned, perhaps through local connections, about Junho's struggle. Unable to give directly, he had, through some back channel, arranged for a portion of the rental deposit to be quietly returned to me. His way of settling debts from a youth neither of us could return to, but which still lived quietly, leafing through the corners of the present. He could not re-enter my life, but he could show kindness in ways that would not start local gossip. No grand gestures, just a quiet, unrecorded grace pressed between ledger lines. The day I learned all this, our home became a stage for one final confrontation. My mother-in-law confronted me, rattled by rumors that I had been seen with a man outside the real estate office. She said the neighbors were already whispering, judgment in every syllable, standing before her with my savings book in hand. I understood that words would only make things worse. Instead, I simply sat beside her and offered the bank book, my face as calm and dry as autumn fields. My heart, though, was rough and lumpy. With the passage of years, events moved fast, yet felt as if they had been waiting, building all along. My mother-in-law closed her eyes for a long moment as she turned the bank book in her hands. For the first time, I saw the blue veins on her worn hands tremble not with anger, but with a tired, ocean-deep yearning for safety. I realized she was never just here to suffocate me. She had lived her whole life wrapping her arms around her fear, trying to keep this family afloat, even if her grip was too tight for comfort. Her obsession became her life jacket, and at times the anchor that weighed her down. That night, I quietly resolved not to reach out to Dongmin. Perhaps his kindness was his way of closing an old ledger as well. In middle age, we are all debtors, owing each other the unspoken things of youth, words unsaid, goodbyes never finished. But I needed to clear my own slate, to live honestly with my story, my choices, just as I once did, in tears at my husband's urn. I marked a small private line beside my name. At the lease signing, my mother-in-law, the children, and I went together. Junho and Sujin chose the monthly rental, and we added a clause, with her nervous blessing, to revisit the question of a long-term lease in a year's time. For the first time in ages, my mother-in-law let out a long, gentle sigh. Our house is not always peaceful now. The neighborhood still gossips, and I sense their idle curiosity trailing behind me most days. But I have changed quietly, in a way my mother-in-law perhaps never can. She still cannot break old habits of obsession, but every now and then she slices wild greens for soup and glances at me, not with surveillance, but with a wary, hopeful kindness. She no longer asks questions, she simply prepares the food, and I, in time, set out a plate for her. It is our way of forgiving, muted gestures that cover wounds more gently than any apology. I still open my little safe some nights. Inside lie the quiet rights to age in my own name, the careful rounds of red ink left by my mother-in-law in a lifetime of protection, and the silent trace of my first love's generosity nestled in a corner. Now, I finally understand. It is not obsession that erodes the foundation of a family, but the refusal to see from another's eyes security, freedom, tradition, and the right to change. These are all just different windows, waiting to be opened. Since that day, I try to keep one window in my heart ajar. Some breezes bring comfort, some bring old ghosts, but all of them remind me to live in the warmth between. So, to those listening, let me ask, when the day comes to weigh your own hard-won security and your family's fragile peace, which would you let go of? And which would you find yourself holding on to, no matter the cost?